Hello, my name is Henrik Nordsyd. I have written a book about engineering in Bronze Age Scandinavia. In this video, I will present a small part of that book.
This video will focus on trying to explain how the environment around these rock carvings affected the boat and its design. I am an engineer and not an archaeologist or biologist, but these areas will be used to explain certain theories. As a mechanical engineer, I look at these boats and see some potential weaknesses. If the theory is correct, and the rock carvings in fact show the type of ballast boat I suggest, which consists of an upper and lower keel, and those parts were made of tree trunks. How did they do it? The clinker-built boats that the Vikings built used smaller pieces of wood that were put together to form a bent keel. Doing it this way means that you introduce a weak section in the boat. Most construction's weakest points are where two different parts are joined together. Joints basically mean you introduce a big crack in the structure and a discontinuation in the wood fibers. This was the case for the clinker-built boats. If the ballast boats were made from different straight logs, then to create the bent ends fore and aft, the different logs would have to be joined by the bend in the keel. This would introduce a crack in the worst position for this boat. When going into a wave, the wave will push on the bent shape of the upper keel and create a torque that creates large stresses in the bent area, or where the joint would be. When the boat is pulled up from the sea, the weight of the boat will sit on the area where the joint on the lower keel would be. My idea is there were no joints in these areas, and instead, the different keels were made of bent logs that was formed as they grew. The depiction of the bend is usually very smooth and rounded. If the keel was made from different pieces of wood, then it is more likely that the keels would be depicted as three straight lines instead. Rune writing shows that it is easier to chisel out straight lines instead of round shapes. Trees that grow into a specific shape forms smooth curved forms, but man-made objects are usually straight pieces joined in right angles, as is the case for the connections between the lower and upper keel. What about steam bending? This only works for parts where the ratio between the bend and the thickness of the part is favorable. There is a limit on how much a wood fiber can stretch or compress. For a specific bend or radius, a max thickness of the wood is possible. This is due to that the outer side must stretch more around the center line when the thickness of the part increases. Best way of understanding this is to think about how the circumference differs between the circle where there is increasing difference between the inner and outer radius. A log is very thick compared to the bend radius. So let us start with a tree with one bend. Here are a few different ways of joining different logs. Different splits at different places gives more or less favorable structural integrity of the boat. There are many more alternative designs, but the main theory rests on the boats built with similar techniques as the log cabins, or the different rafts used by different cultures. This means that they were probably built from logs that was formed sparingly and then joined by different strips of material that binds the logs together. How did they build so many boats with tree trunks that had natural bends in them? Would it not have been impossible to find these logs? If you ever walk along the shoreline, you will notice how many trees there are that naturally form different bends. This is due to the windy conditions along the shorelines, but also due to that the shoreline forms a barrier for the trees, and so there is an opening on one side of the forest that faces the sea. This side gets more wind, but it also allows for trees to reach out of the forest to get more sunlight. For people living along the coastline, observing trees that was bent in different shapes was very likely. And to start with, they probably used trees with natural bends. But I think they eventually started to form the trees, so they would grow into the shape they wanted. Most of the rock carvings in Scandinavia is on a specific type of rock, namely a hell. That is why they are called hällristningar. A hell is a smooth rock surface usually found between the ocean and the forest. A hell is not a rock wall or other large boulders. So these carvings were generally carved on smooth rock surface by the sea, where there is a gentle slope down to where the sea was at this time. After the Ice Age, the ground started to move up, so now most rock carvings is not close to the water anymore. A very large number of rock carvings depicts boats. In some cases, they have just drawn many carvings side by side of each other. For me, this indicates a way of documentation. A documentation of the boats from this place, possibly built by the trees growing next to these rock carvings. The logs for some of these boats needed trees that would have grown for at least one human generation. So the people that started to form the trees did it not to do it for themselves, but their offsprings. To evaluate if you found a good place to grow trees, this would require many human generations. Rock carvings last for a very long time, and if you want to preserve a legacy, rock carving is a good way to do so. These rock carvings could be made so future generations could see that from this place this many boats were built. There are also depictions of warriors. This can indicate that the ones who owned these trees could use deadly force to protect them. One more indication that supports this theory is that the rock carvings in Scandinavia stopped around the time when the Nordsydtid was built. The Nordsydtid is clinker built from planks and not bent logs, and with this introduction of a new building technique, managing the legacy of the bent trees was not necessary anymore. The Native Americans used to bend trees to indicate trails that they could follow. The art of bonsai is very old as well. Humans forming trees would not be something unique to Scandinavian history. Building a keel for a boat from two bent trees would not be that hard, as many trees have this naturally in them. But was it also possible that they bent the trees in two places, or technically 3 places, but the bend that bent down to the root was cut off? There is a forest in Poland, Żywy las, with weird looking trees. They look like they have been bent just above ground, and they are still doing fine. Or did they form the taproot so it would form a bend? The tree line next to the rock carvings would have a very shallow layer of soil, so if the tree had a large taproot, it could not grow downward, but would have to bend to one side. Ideally, this would be the same side as the bend the tree had in the top of it, close to its crown. This would mean that the lopsided tree would have extra support in the root system to support it, but also grow a bend that somewhat matches the top. Yggdrasil is a famous tree from the Norse mythology, and it is a famous tree with even more famous root system. In bonsai art, roots are also managed to form specific shapes. Is it possible they used the roots and managed them? Maybe, but it would have been easier to bend a tree above the ground. In the Norse mythology, there are women, witches of sort, that tended to Yggdrasil's root system, giving it water and soil, so it would not dry out or rot. The women from this Norse mythology were called Norns or Nornor. They are known for tending to Yggdrasil's roots, but also they could see into the future and decide the fate of others. Tending to the trees for future boat builders fits the bill very well for this next rock carving. This, I believe, is the depiction of the original Norns. To the right, Two persons with long hair can be seen. To the left is what I believe is a cross-section of a tree trunk, the large round part. The trident shapes pointing out from the tree trunk is branches, or maybe a bit more far-fetched, the roots of a tree. The Norns lay their hand on the tree, and at this stage the tridents are connected to the trunk. In the next carving, similar shapes occur, but in this there are no Norns, and the tridents are now not connected to the central circular shape. This could mean that the smaller twigs are removed from the tree trunk, or that the smaller roots are removed from the taproot, forcing the taproot not to spread out. Long logs with no twigs were needed as material for the boat builders. Forcing the tree to grow as a tall tree instead of forming a more bush-like shape meant that you would want to trim off the twigs from the main trunk. This is what I think is most likely depicted on the rock carving. The tridents look like tree shoots or tree suckers from a conifer tree, where the individual pine needles are not carved into the rock for obvious reasons. This is of course not evidence that they bent trees into a specific shape, more that they tended to the trees. Wood without knots are stronger and something you want to have no matter what kind of boat you want to build. This means that this tradition could have followed into the Iron Age, but the rock carvings and the Barlastboat did not. Is there any evidence from this time that suggests that natural formation in trees were used to improve the structural integrity of parts? Ötzi, the Iceman, that was found in the Italian Alps is believed to have lived around 3350 to 3105 BC. He was found with a small axe with a very small copper blade that was attached to a piece of wood that was both the handle and the head of the axe. Copper was only used for the blade and not as today, where both the blade section and the head of the axe is made of the same metal material. The handle and the axe head are made from a single piece of wood that has a natural bend in it. This of course saves material, as only the metal is used in the part that cuts. But this also makes it more robust, as the connection between the metal and wood does not take any bending force when the axe is used, and as many using axes have experienced, it is this connection between the metal axe head and the handle where you usually get problems with an axe. There are depictions of axes on the rock carvings in Scandinavia. In these, it is possible to see that the blade narrows down to the section closest to the handle, but there is also the butt of the axe going outside of the handle. Some other rock carvings could depict stone axes. It is not clear if the axe Ötzi carried was used in Scandinavia as well, or if it was used before the depictions were created, and as an alternative for people that could not afford to have an axe with an entire axe head made of metal. But the vicinity of these findings could mean that there is a big chance that this form of understanding of design would have been shared. And even though Ötzi had an axe with a copper blade, he had tools that was made of stone or horn material. This also supports the idea that it was more of a Bronze Stone Age rather than a pure Bronze Age, as most tools were still made from stone materials rather than metal materials. So the Ötzi find also points towards a society where tools were made from stone. Stone tools would not be suitable for clinker-built boats that is made of many individual planks. It could be possible to make a clinker-built boat using stone tools, but looking at the abundance of rock carvings of boats, there seemed to have been an abundance of boats as well. Building clinker-built boats using stone tools would likely have made the boats very rare. The plow depicted in this rock carving looks like the plow displayed at the museum in Copenhagen. This plow is made from two bent pieces of wood that are joined together. This could be made from natural occurring bent pieces of wood, but at least it resembles the proposed production method of the Barlastboat. That is all for this video. If you want to know more about the women tending to the trees and their importance in the Scandinavian society and how maybe they evolved into witches, there is another video on that subject.
I hope you liked this video and check out my other videos, and if you want more details, please buy my book. Thank you for watching this video, and bye.